There have been a few Thors over the years, from Kevin Masterson as Thunderstrike to Walt Simonson's favorite horse Thor named Beta Ray Bill, and Simon Walterson, the frog Thor named Throg, to Jane Foster as Mighty Thor, to Donald Blake himself. Today, on the heels of Marvel's Phase 4 announcement that Natalie Portman would reprise her role not only as Jane Foster for Thor Love and Thunder, but that she'd be worthy to wield Mjolnir. Let's break down the history of Jane Foster and how she became worthy. Before we jump in though, let me thank you for watching and subscribing to JLS Comics. We upload comic book, superhero, film, and anime content every week. I'm glad you're here. Alright, so the character of Jane Foster has had an interesting story arc. From her first appearance in 1962's Journey into Mystery, which was just one issue after Thor himself appeared in Marvel Comics, to her turn as Thor in Thor God of Thunder 25, her journey has been sparked with tragedy and an ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. In Unworthy Thor number 4, we learn that Jane's mother passed away when she was a child from cancer, and her father, as told in Mighty Thor 704, took on the role of both parental figures, was taking his time to take her to school, to her games, encouraging her to go to medical school for her nursing degree, just being this light in her life. But he died from a myocardial infarction, heart attack. But luckily, her trip through nursing school found her working under a physician named Dr. Donald Blake, and unbeknownst to her, Donald Blake was Thor's alias while on Earth. In these early issues of Journey into Mystery, Jane didn't know that he was Thor. He almost told her at one time before Odin, who's his father, intervened and convinced him that it really would not be wise. He did this a couple times. This became a point of contention between Blake and Jane. Eventually, the Allfather Odin conceded to his Odin son, saying, if she can prove herself worthy enough, then you can marry her son. A couple of characters that I predicted would be in Thor 4, in a video that I did last week, would actually torment Thor during this time period. Talking about Amora the Enchantress and Scourge the Executioner. For a brief time, Odin transformed her into an Asgardian goddess, but then quickly removed her powers and memories of Asgard. And Odin actually sent her back to Earth while he was trying to set up Thor with Lady Sif. Then we get into this other character that might appear in Thor 4 named Ulik the Troll. Lady Sif had transferred her power into Jane to save her from this fatal illness, not the cancer, we're not there yet, which caused her to actually regain her powers and her memories. It was then that she was able to help Thor defeat Ulik, and they went on these like crazy adventures together. Thor had his Jane with the spirit of Lady Sif within him. So this could actually be a potential plot point for Thor 4. Jason Aaron's run on Thor God of Thunder, Unworthy Thor, Mighty Thor, War of the Realms, all of that is really great stuff. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. I really enjoy his take on the Asgardian mythos. In Thor God of Thunder number 12, we learned that Jane was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was around this time that a comic book event called Original Sin was taking place. Nick Fury, the man on the wall at the time, learned something from Uatu the Watcher, which he whispered in Thor's ear. Right after that, Thor believed himself unworthy, and he left Mjolnir on the moon, unable to lift it. What did he say? We didn't know. It was Mjolnir, the hammer itself, that reached out to Jane. It was this telepathic connection that they had, apparently. Jane reached out to Heimdall, who is the guy that guards on the Rainbow Bridge, and said, hey, can you find out where the hammer is and take me there? And he did. And lo and behold, she lifted the hammer. But nobody knew it was her for a while. It was a secret. And that actually drove Thor kind of nuts. Couldn't figure out who lifted his hammer. One time, Thor actually ran into Gwenpool, and Gwenpool knew who she was because she, in her universe, reads comic books, which are the stories of the 616. It's like us reading it. It's an interesting take on it. Her adventures also ran through Jason Aaron's Mighty Thor run, something that Thor director Taika Waitit specifically referenced in his announcement. Her story is closely attached to Thor Odin's son, and so I fully expect Chris Hemsworth to show up, despite his absence at 2019 SDCC. Apparently he has re-upped his contract, and he's good to go for a few more movies, albeit with more money coming his way. But here's the tough part. Jane was undergoing chemotherapy treatments for her breast cancer. Every time she lifted the hammer and felt its power, the progress from all of her chemo was wiped away. Every time she wielded the hammer, her cancer would progress through her lymph nodes into her bone marrow, and she ultimately progressed to stage 4 cancer, which is fatal. It was like a timer ticking down on her life, and she knew this, but heroically lifted the hammer anyway. With great power comes great responsibility, just like Spider-Man, right? Eventually, Doctor Strange told her that if she lifted it one more time, she would die, but she did. Mangog had sent Asgard hurtling towards the sun, and she had to intervene and died. But Odin and Thor channeled the Mother of Thunder, the god Tempest, to bring her back to life, and Thor rescued her. In War of the Realms number 3, Frigga made Jane an interim All-Mother. She found the Ultimate Universe's Mjolnir, so she once again had a hammer, and it turned her back into Thor. She bravely fought Malekith and Laufey, but the hammer was destroyed, but it wasn't lost. The pieces of the hammer became this sort of armored gauntlet that went right onto her arm. It's pretty neat, actually. Finally, in War of the Realms Omega, the spirits of the Valkyries appeared, Brunhilde included, and asked her to become a Valkyrie. And so here we find ourselves at the end of her story so far in comic books, and a new comic book volume with her new moniker of Valkyrie. In the MCU, though, her story is a little bit different. Jane is not a nurse, which is a worthy profession. She is an astrophysicist. With the Thor mantle now hers, she's not female Thor or Lady Thor or Thunder Bunny or Thordess. She's Thor. In Thor Love and Thunder, will she become worthy on her own, or will the death of, say, Lady Sif help her as it did in the comic books, which we just talked about? From where will she get a hammer? In Thor Ragnarok, Hela destroyed the hammer on Earth, and presumably the pieces are still laying there in the field, so maybe they could have that reforged. Who knows? In Avengers Endgame, though, Thor did borrow a hammer from the past, but Captain America returned it. So I'm wondering how this is going to be handled. How will her story end in the movie? Will she have cancer? Will that be the end of her story? And where's she been all this time? I mean, in story, we know that she wanted to work with Patty Jenkins on Thor Dark World before Alan Taylor took over. So she was upset about this and the critically low rating of the film. She was not happy with the progress of the character. So she departed. She's been gone. But where has she been in story? In Thor Ragnarok, Thor does say that they broke up. So I guess that kind of explains away her absence and writes her off. But it is kind of a surprise that she's back, not only because of the direction of the character, but Portman's willingness as well. Although, in a move of subtle foreshadowing, Natalie did show up at the premiere of Avengers Endgame, and then they actually used some unused Dark World footage for a cameo in the film, with Rocket needing to extract the ether from her womb, which I'm not sure how Captain America put that back, but alright, I guess. With that context, though, this general context, it does make more sense. But will the Soul Forge, the quantum field generator, also play a role in Thor 4? Will this help her get her powers? Can she, a supporting character, whether it's here or whether it's Padme Amidala, carry the film as a lead? Her character was mishandled, as we talked about, lacked development, and this is something, as we said, that drove Natalie away in the first place. So how will this be handled? And has she truly earned it? Not just Jane in story, but Natalie herself. I mean, like I said, she's been gone all this time. That said, I do have faith in Taika and in Kevin Feige to turn out a good story for her. So will she become the next Captain Marvel or the next fan favorite new Avenger? Also, Valkyrie is officially LGBT and looking for her queen. Will that be Jane? We'll find out when Thor comes out at the end of Phase 4, which is November 5th, 2021. So that's it, my friends, all about Jane Foster as Mighty Thor. If you like content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can be a part of all our conversations, new and old. Go ahead and leave me some comments down below, your unfiltered thoughts on the direction for this movie. Trust me, I've heard some interesting takes so far, and hey, it helps the algorithm in the channel. So that's it. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.